Hi, everyone. So I will kind of take a small section of special education students and how we are setting up for success for our special education students. As Dr. Zhang mentioned earlier, that we have 14% of our students who are in Fairfax County Public Schools who are students with disabilities. And these students with disabilities range from anywhere from students with learning disabilities to students with severe intellectual disabilities. So there is a wide range of our students who are here. So today we will be talking about some of the barriers and some of the strategies for success for setting up these students during the virtual instruction. Some of the barriers that we face for our students with disabilities is in-home support. So several of our students, we see that some of our students with learning disabilities and other maybe autism and other disabilities, they can work on their own, but then several of our students with intellectual disabilities and severe intellectual disabilities might require in-home support, which might require a parent or and a sibling to sit next to them while they are accessing the virtual learning. Virtual learning is not easy specifically for our students with disabilities. Technology is another barrier. Dr. Zhang mentioned that we have 28% of our students in Fairfax County Public Schools who are economically disadvantaged. So several of our students that we see do not even have a computer or any other such source at home. Dr. Zhang, can we go back to the previous slide for a second, please?
Yes.
Thank you. There are, in addition to technology, there are a lot of students who have medical needs or who have physical limitations, because of which they have difficulty accessing the technology or the computer and those kind of things. They also have difficulty with kind of using the mouse and other technologies that we were talking about. So when we are setting them up with virtual learning, we have to really think about those limitations. In addition to that, we have behavioral concerns. We have students who can't even sit in front of the computer for 5 seconds. So when we are looking at this virtual learning, we have to be thinking about, as educators, all of these things that kind of contribute towards the success of our students. Prompting is another issue, because when the students are in our brick and mortar buildings, it's very easy for us to kind of address the prompting piece. We can work with, okay, we don't need to prompt the students, but in-home environment, working with the in-home support, it kind of changes the role of the teachers from not just being teachers, but also the coaches. So we have to really kind of think about that. And last but not the least, the progress monitoring. Are the students with disabilities making progress in this environment? Dr. Masielli covered some of those areas, but then when it comes to students with disabilities, it becomes all the more difficult because they might not be able to access the Kahoot, or they might not be able to make that selection, or they're using other devices or other modes of responses to be able to make their selections. So we have to kind of think about all of these different factors when we are looking at the barriers. Moving on to the strategies. So when we are thinking about the strategies, I have kind of categorized them into 4 different areas. So digital access, instructional delivery, behavior and reinforcement, and then building positive relationships with families. And we will go into each one in detail on the next few slides. So when we talk about digital access and equity, it is really important that we make sure that all those digital materials and platforms are accessible to our students. So that might require that we provide the students with like a screen reader, we provide the students with touch screens or monitors, or for some of our students, we need to make sure that they have the physical materials at home, because those physical materials are needed as the teacher is doing her instruction, that those physical materials are needed for the students to make their choices or indicate what they, the comprehension of the text or whatever is being provided on the screen. Additionally, we also need to think about the assistive technology devices, because several of our students depend on augmentative communication devices to be able to access the technology or to be able to even express their wants and needs. So we need to make sure that the parents have those at home. They also have the stuff in terms of being able to charge those devices and have them available when the students are sitting down for the digital learning. So there are so many of the, when we think about digital access and equity, it changes based on our students and their needs. And as teachers, we are expecting teachers to kind of gather this information, working with the other partners and really with the other stakeholders, and really making sure that our digital tools are equitable and accessible for all our students when we are thinking about that. So there's a lot to think about here. When we go to instructional delivery, also thinking about synchronous and asynchronous methods. So there should be multiple ways that we are thinking about. I was just talking to several of our teachers, and they're using both of these tools, like synchronous being when the teacher is in front of the computer, talking to the students in front of the camera, and asynchronous is things that the students can do on their own. These activities are being set up. I was talking to some teachers, and they were saying that in March, when we started with digital learning or distance learning, when COVID started, at that time it was very hard for our students. But recently, we just started school 2 days ago, and the students have been able to sit for as long as 5 hours in front of the computer and work. But again, kudos to our teachers, because they're using tools like Padlet, they're using tools like Chatbox and raising hand and all of those digital platform tools that are available, and engaging the students in a meaningful way. So again, that meaningful and engagement, student engagement, is key when we are talking about distance learning. Going into the behavior and reinforcement. So the first few weeks, we are just talking about those clear routines and expectations. Yes, when you are in the building, you are talking about, okay, you transition from here to there. So when we are talking about distance learning, those routines and expectations have to be set up. We were talking about those breakout groups. Those students need to know how to move from one breakout group to the next, how to raise their hand, how to use the chat box, how to unmute themselves and share what they are thinking. Also thinking about those individual behavior systems. It's very easy for us to kind of, when we are in the classroom, to deliver those tokens, reinforcement systems. But when we are in the distance learning environment, how do you make that meaningful? How do you give it for the students? And use things that they really like. It could be a video, it could be stretch break, could be getting up, those kind of things. And also involving the parents, because sometimes some of our students need those tangible reinforcers. So they might need something in their hand to play with. It might be a game, those kind of things. And again, thinking about that individualized reinforcement. So really thinking about those individual things that we are talking about for the students. The last but not the least, and Dr. Marcelli talked about building positive relationships. So building positive relationships, not only with the students, but also with the families. This is so key, especially because if the teachers have never met their students, it's really, really important. I have teachers who are reporting that the students are shy. They don't want to show their face on the camera, or they're only showing their forehead on the camera, or they refuse to turn their camera on because, and that makes it harder for the teachers because they're not able to see what the students are doing, or are they participating, or are they even able to access that. So really thinking about that, acknowledging the strengths of the students. So we always come from the strengths-based model that yes, in special ed, we have to address through the individualized education plans, we have to address the needs of the students, but really starting with the strengths. What are some of the strengths of our students? Also building the trust with their families. That is key to distance learning, because if students do not have the trust of the teacher, or their trust is not there, students are not going to be able to talk during the distance learning format. And also recognizing parents as decision makers, because parents are a key factor in this distance learning environment, especially when we are talking about students with disabilities, being able to understand the challenges of what the students are facing at home. Several of our parents are working. They can't sit with our students during the time when the teachers are providing this instruction. So how can we make it manageable for those students? How can we involve the parents so that we can provide meaningful instruction? for our students during the time when they are not, when the distance learning is not accessible in a synchronous environment. So these are all some things that I'm leaving you with to think about. There's a lot, and there are a lot of tools. So really thinking about your individual students and planning your instruction based on that. Thank you so much for listening.